Hello and welcome to this episode of the Curiosity Key podcast, where I'm joined by Michael Groves of Topolytics. So thank you, Michael, for joining me on this podcast.
Good morning. How are you doing? I'm delighted to be here in a virtual sense.
Brilliant. Yes, we are calling in remotely. So you're based in Edinburgh, that's right, isn't it?
I am, yes. The beautiful city, the Athens of the North.
It's my dream to move up to Edinburgh.
What's that?
It's my dream to move up to Edinburgh one day.
Well, yeah. Well, absolutely. It's a great place to live. Lots of culture, lots of tech. And then you've got a third of the UK landmass on your doorstep with lots of wonderful hills to walk on.
Yes, I think my appeal is the mountains and the whiskey, I think, definitely.
The mountains for me, whiskey, I don't know. But some great beer as well.
Well, yeah.
Awesome. Brewdog for details.
Yes, absolutely. Now, the reason why I wanted to get you onto this podcast is you kind of blend two worlds of mine that I have a huge amount of interest in. One is mapping and everything geospatial, and the other is sustainability. So instead of me talking about Topolytics and what it is that you're doing, do you want to just give us a little bit of your background and tell us a little bit about Topolytics as well?
Okay. My background, academically, I'm a geographer. So I guess that kind of gives you a clue as to the sort of the mapping thing. And then I did a PhD in remote sensing, so aerial photography and satellite remote sensing, looking at forest decline in Germany back in the day. And I finished that, and somebody said to me, what sort of job do you want to do, Mike? And I sort of thought about it for a moment and said, well, I'd quite like to go and work in environmental management. And then they thought about it for a moment and sort of leaned over towards me and said, Sonny, I think you should get yourself a proper job. But that was over 20 years ago now, I suppose. So things have perhaps moved on a little since then. And of course, I ignored their advice and basically went into environmental management. So did some consultancy work, and then I ended up helping to write the principles and criteria of the Forest Stewardship Council, which is a kind of one of the first kind of sustainable forestry certification schemes, the FSC. And then I worked for a Swiss company and ran around Southeast Asia for about 3 or 4 years doing certification of sustainable forest or unsustainable forest management in most cases. And then came back to the UK, set up a consultancy business that basically did sustainability reporting for big companies in the main. And then also set up a baby product company as well along the way with my wife, which is a market leader, sells all over the world. And then we sold the consultancy business, and that's really the beginning of Topolytics. And the idea being that when you look at environmental reporting, there's a real sort of challenge around the quality of that information and the timeliness of that information. So I thought it's an opportunity to mix data with the reporting piece. And we've sort of evolved from there, but the way we've sort of chosen to sort of contextualize and manage the data and then visualize and analyze the data was geospatially, because I'm a geographer. And so that's kind of how we've evolved into what we're doing now, which is basically we're creating what I call a smart grid for the world's commercial and industrial waste. So, waste, as we're now seeing, is being moved around the place and nobody really knows what's happening to it. So it's a big industry. It's worth about $400 billion a year, but it's not very transparent. And obviously we're now starting to recognize that some of that material is ending up where it shouldn't. And both geographically, but also a lot of that material is still going into landfills. So the outcomes are not brilliant. So we think there's an opportunity to build a global, granular, high quality data set on what that material is, where that material goes, and how much of that material is there, in order that people can then make better decisions about that material. So we don't have this scenario where most of the world's waste is still going into kind of landfills or ending up where it really shouldn't be anyway. So that's our thing. So Topolytics is in essence, as a business, is a sort of data analytics business, and we've created a sort of big data platform we call WasteMap. And so we are literally mapping the movement of all this material.
And what How do your customers use this data then? What's the outcome for your customers? Like, why do your customers want it?
Well, I mean, if you think about waste producers, like big companies that generate waste, I mean, they are now starting to ask the question of what happens to all of our waste, because the model is they basically pay somebody to take it away. And so, so that, the contracts remove that material, and the waste producer, their customer, has then really no idea of what happens to that material. They might ask the question occasionally, but actually they don't know the end point, because that waste could go on quite a journey. It could go through multiple hands. So it's quite a complex value chain. So so we're using data science, sort of machine learning, et cetera, to really try and kind of unpick that value chain and really build up a better picture of what's happening to that material. So number one, so it's the idea of what you might call producer responsibility. So increasingly, companies, organizations, and I think ultimately us as consumers will have to take more responsibility for the waste that we're generating. And I think probably we'll end up having to pay more to have that waste sort of managed, and we will pay per throw as well. But we're focused on companies' waste because there's a lot of that material has a high value, and that could be reused by those companies as well. So it's the idea of producer responsibility. It's the idea of reducing the risks attached to not knowing what happens to that material. The idea of being able to then report effectively on waste, because there are still real problems with the data that comes back to those companies in terms of what that material is and how much of that material is they are generating as a waste. And then there's the opportunity to actually start to look at that material in terms of its reuse and its value, and that gets us into the whole world of the circular economy as well. So that would be a sort of certainly from the waste producer's point of view.
And it's nice to see that I think more and more people are talking about the circular economy, and more consumers and smaller businesses are becoming a lot more aware about where their waste is going, what happens to it, how they can reduce it a little bit more. Are you starting to see that like now at the moment, with especially all the media hype around sustainability, especially with sort of reducing plastic, or has that just been a continual growth from your perspective?
No, I think there's no doubt waste is suddenly a thing. It's there is a bit of a kind of zeitgeist thing, and that God bless David Attenborough. I mean, the world's greatest environmental communicator, bar none, and that has obviously created a lot of attention around, particularly around where that waste is ending up. So you've got the whole piece now happening around ocean plastics, and we just won a sort of global competition that was run by Google Cloud and SAP, and they basically put out this challenge to entrepreneurs to say we're looking for a commercial scalable technology that could drive the circular economy. So 250 companies submitted applications from about 50 countries, and we won that amazingly. But we're absolutely delighted by that. But that's obviously given us some interesting access to some amazing technology and kind of market access. But one of the things that we went out on a boat into the middle of the Atlantic, courtesy of SAP, about a month ago, and specifically looking at ocean plastics. So it's called the Ocean Plastics Leadership Summit, and basically it was a kind of experience for corporates, NGOs, academics, entrepreneurs, and various other people looking at the problem. So we went out, we sort of went, snorkeling, and we went trawling in the middle of the Atlantic for kind of, this ocean plastics. And, we did one trawl, which is 1 kilometer trawl, in about 2,500 meters of water. And we pulled this, the seaweed out of this sort of trawl, analyzed it in the lab, and there were about 76 bits of sort of microplastic in that. And that was like 1 kilometer at the surface, when you've got 2.5 kilometers underneath you, and that's one bit of the Atlantic. And to me, that sort of brought home the problem is that, we all get worried about the stuff we can see, but it's the stuff you can't see, which is the real problem. So I think, there's obviously a sort of a growing consciousness about the problem of waste, and obviously plastic is getting a real some real kind of attention at the moment, specifically around that. So it's definitely a thing that's suddenly, really within the last sort of 18 months or so, 2 years to 18 months, has kind of become, a lot more interest being shown. And I think certainly the question that's being asked now is, we're seeing people asking the question, what does happen to all that material? So that's something that we're, clearly that sort of plays into what we're trying to do. So
and
yeah,
is that helping your business grow because more and more people are asking those questions?
Yeah, exactly. So our market environment is from our point of view is that's a kind of a growth driver, because there is clearly a demand. People have said to me in the past, and they've said, why are you doing what you're doing? It's like, I said, what do you mean? He said, like, waste management. But it's at the end of the day, it's a big global problem. We keep pumping stuff out, pumping waste out. The quantum keeps going up, and we need to deal with it somehow. So we either reduce it in the first place, or we deal more effectively with that material that we are generating as a waste. So our view is that ultimately we want to try and reduce it, but when you've got the quantum continuing to grow, you've got to deal with all that stuff that's being generated, and that's what we're trying to do. But by doing that, we also show people we're showing people what happens to that material, and that in itself generates, all sorts of kind of different sort of behavior changes and process changes, and the whole question of reduction then becomes, comes up higher up the agenda once people realise what's happening to all that material. So yeah, so it's a driver for us, definitely.
And how did you find, because you've been in business with Topolytics specifically for just over 5 years now, is that right?
Yeah.
So how did you find the process and actually launching the business and getting new customers when you first launched it? 'Cause this big buzz around reduce, reuse, recycle wasn't as talked about back then. So
yeah, I mean, well, it's not my first startup, let's put it that way. So I knew what I was letting myself in for, and I think my view on on sort of startups and entrepreneurship is that it always takes longer. It always takes longer. And everybody is a 10-year overnight success. When you look at some of the really successful companies, people see the success and they see people raising lots of money, or they see them exiting or whatever. But there's been 10 years of graft and wading through crap to get to that point. So people don't see that. But I kind of, having had some experience in starting businesses, I kind of, to a certain extent, knew what to expect. And like a lot of startups, we started out thinking we were one thing, and we've sort of, to a certain extent, pivoted. You could argue along the way. So we've kind of explored things along the way to get to the point that we're at now, which is, and the reason it's taken 5 years is that partly because the market really wasn't ready. Whereas the market is market acceptance is, the whole waste thing has suddenly become, as I say, has become a thing. But also, we're bootstrapped as well. So, we have to we build as we go. We've sort of built and through proof of concept projects, and so it's been really, really hard. But, we have this confidence that, there is a big opportunity out there, and we're now starting to I think realize that, but it's taken a while. Yeah.
So if you could look back over the last 5 years, are there any kind of like key moments or key things that you would do differently at knowing what you know now?
Well, you'd always want to move quicker, so, but how, the process of moving quicker, there's no kind of easy answers on that. So that's certainly one thing. I'd love to be sitting here now thinking it's only taken us 3 years. That would have been brilliant. But 5 years of my life, but it's a hard one, that. I mean, I think, would you do anything differently? Probably, but I'm kind of not quite sure what that would be. So I can't really answer that, other than to say that, again, come back to the point about entrepreneurship. And the thing that often doesn't get discussed and doesn't get aired is quality. Particularly in tech, everyone thinks, it's all about innovation, and it's all about ideas and build fast and fail fast and all that kind of stuff. And to a certain extent, that's fine when you've raised $10 million, sort of, and you're pre-revenue and blah 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 blah. But I think for most companies, it's that whole perseverance piece. It's kind of starting with the kernel of an idea, but then trying to sort of put that into practice, and just sort of building something that, getting to a point where you've got some kind of product market fit. And it's taken us a while to get there, but I think we're sort of at that point now. So there's probably loads of stuff that, there's no doubt I've made loads of mistakes, and there's no doubt I'll continue to make loads of mistakes. But it's kind of how you deal with that and how you overcome that, and just keeping going. So there's an element of, it's not so much blind faith, but there's just an element of having faith in your own vision, if you like.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And it's something that I talk about quite a lot, is that, sort of keep, sort of maintain your confidence, surround yourself with people that help you maintain that confidence. And it's that kind of grit and determination aspect of it. Because I see so many people in the same situation as me, because I'm in my second year of business. This isn't my first business either. So I've got, I've learned from that, wanting everything to happen right there and then. But you do see people try to give up or get fed up because it's not moving as fast as you want it to. But it's that kind of constant reminder that, it is a journey, and that you've just got to kind of keep doing the best that you can. But also, more importantly, make sure that you have something that people want. It seems to be a big problem, especially in tech, that people go off and develop something and then nobody wants it.
Yes.
And what I love about what you're doing is the fact that that there is a big problem that wasn't hugely talked about, that you've sort of started to address before it got into the media. Because I suppose if you were to launch Topolytics now there's a big hype around it. Do you think things would be slightly different because there is that media hype?
I think probably yes. Because I think there'd be a much clearer kind of like the market acceptance, and all the sort of investors and advisors and all the people, around the whole kind of startup scene, would perhaps take me a little bit more seriously than they did previously. People just looked at me and thought I was a tree hugger, I think. If I am accused of being that, I just show them a picture of me standing next to a, Diptera carp in the middle of Borneo and say, well, yeah, I have. I've kind of been there, but we were helping to cut them down responsibly as opposed to hug them. But and I think that point about, my response also on that is that, absolutely, the idea that somebody goes out and builds something without really thinking about the market and the customer. We've evolved to where we are now. So we built slowly, but we built well. Mm-hmm. So because we've built, being quite close to the market and trying to understand what the market wants and what companies want, and getting that kind of feedback as we've gone. So that's, whilst, it would have been nice to have sort of done that quicker, we've kind of, we've done it by, working closely with organizations, with companies, to, and understanding the pain and trying to understand where the commercial model is and where the commercial opportunity is. And so we've kind of evolved towards that, but we've really learned a lot along the way. And also along the way, we've then managed to we've built a position in our market. In our market, there is some people call it smart waste, which is a contradiction in terms, possibly. Some people call it WasteTech, and that's worth about $2 billion a year. Most of the revenues come from bin sensor systems, the so-called Internet of Bins. But there's a growing bit of that, which is all about AI, machine learning, analytics, etc. And that's the bit we're in. And we've built a kind of position in that market as a leading player in that market. So we've managed to do that as we've sort of gone along as well. So there are some merits to sort of, kind of building close to the market, as opposed to just getting something out there and hoping for the best.
It's something that I talk about a lot, which is, I think there are more than, I think that it's an undervalued thing to do. It's just kind of build slowly, but make sure that you're doing it based on market feedback. Because I think we assume we know what the market wants. And I see with a lot of the tech companies that I work with and that I speak to, is that kind of, there is a big assumption that we know what the market wants because we feel strongly about the problem that we're solving or what's going on, that, we'll develop a business or we'll develop a product or a piece of technology that solves that problem without necessarily going to the market and saying, right, okay, cool, how do you talk about this problem? How do you respond to it? What do you want? And then working closely with the customers, because it's the customers that are going to drive the growth of the business at the end of the day.
Absolutely. There's no substitute for revenues.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of, what you've just said sort of led me nicely into the next question, because it's all about, I like to celebrate the successes, because you've had a lot of successes over the last 5 years. So looking back over the last 5 years, kind of what would you say you did right, and what sort of things are you celebrating that you've done right and kind of want to build on and keep doing, really?
Well, I think we've kind of evolved to where we are now. I mean, we started out, I had a consultancy business, and we did quite a lot of sustainability reports, so annual sustainability reports. These sort of CSR, or whatever you want to call them. CSR, by the way, is common sense, really.
I've not heard that one before. I love it.
And so that model, I felt, was with what was going on with big data and AI and Industry 4.0 stuff, I thought, well, actually, could you pitch the data to the reporting? Because obviously, there's lots of kind of this data in the big companies ends up in these big databases, and then they drag it out of these databases, and then they stick it into these big, expensive printed documents. And I thought, is there a way to make that kind of real time? And also, we were seeing lots of smaller companies having to kind of disclose this kind of sustainability information to their customers. So we thought, is there an opportunity to build something for SMEs that was a real-time environmental reporting system? And that was the original concept. But the way we chose to organize and visualize that data was geospatially, because I'm a geographer, and that's the way I kind of see the world. So that was the initial thing. But we built an MVP. We took it out there. It was really interesting and learned a lot. But whilst there was a lot of interest at that point, I didn't feel that there was quite enough commercial pain. So there was there was interest, but not real pain. So we sort of gradually evolved that. We did a whole bunch of work with real-time data. So we got some feedback. Said, we love the mapping, but what about IoT and sensors and that kind of data? So we did 2 big projects, which took actually the best part of 2 years to kind of create these projects and then implement them. And one was in Scotland and one was in China, and they both involved real-time sensor data. But that allowed us to build capability and to learn how the IoT works, and to build some IP into Topolytics as well. And so we sort of evolved through that, and then we started, sort of looking at, as part of that, we were looking at a whole range of different environmental metrics, including waste. And by far and away, the most interesting thing that, from a geospatial point of view, was waste, because it's a physical material that is moved around, and that system of movements is so complex and so opaque that that's really where we could see there was a real opportunity. And at the same time, then the market started to kind of evolve as well, and people started to say, well, actually, what is happening to all that material? What was the original?
It was around sort of celebrating the wins, so celebrating the things that you have done right.
So I think it's kind of been those kind of moments when you've had people say to you, what about this, what about that, and we've sort of we've sort of responded to that. So I would say that was a win, in as much as we've sort of we've had that kind of feedback, and we've been able to respond to that feedback and to build capability and build IP and all the rest as we go. But then we've had obviously recognition some of the stuff we're doing. So there's an organisation called the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is started by the Ops woman Ellen MacArthur, and when she was out in the middle of the oceans and realised she was totally self-contained. So she was using everything on the boat, but she was not throwing anything away. And she thought, well, actually, why can't we do that for real? On a sort of global basis. Why are we getting all these resources, turning them into products, and then chucking them away? Why can't we be self-contained at a sort of fundamental level? So the idea of the circular economy, in essence. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has kind of been going for about 10 years, and they've become this sort of kind of like a global kind of think tank around circular economy sort of principles. And so they have a group of companies they call the CE100, which are companies that they believe are kind of leading the way and innovating on circular economy. So on the one hand, you've got some of the world's biggest companies, IKEA, Dell, Apple, HP, some really big sort of businesses. But then they have a bunch of other companies they call innovators that are also part of that ecosystem. So we were accepted into the C100 kind of last year. So that obviously gave us a quite a good position and profile and some credibility. And then we are currently, as of the end of last year, working with in the UK with the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, which put out a challenge to tech companies to design a system that could track all of the waste in the UK, kind of smart waste tracking system. So they chose 5 companies, and we were one of those companies to sort of design the system. What does this system look like? So we teamed up with the Ordnance Survey. Why not? When you're sort of mapping what happens. So that's been a really amazing experience working with the OS, to kind of really define what a system would look like that could literally track all of the waste material in the UK. And that's not only commercial and industrial, but it's household, municipal, hazardous construction, etc. So that's been a really, really interesting process. And that obviously was a big success for us in terms of doing that work. And then latterly, within the last sort of month or so, as I said earlier on, we won this Google Cloud and SAP Circular Economy Challenge. And so that's now starting to sort of play out. So it's given us access to some amazing machine learning, AI sort of technology, plus some of the capabilities and plus the market access that's offered there. So that's probably the most recent, really real amazing milestone for us, I think.
So there's 2 things that spring to mind on what you were saying, because it's you've got some incredible accolades behind you, won some great awards and opportunities. Have they found you, or have you gone out and looked for those opportunities?
Well, it's a bit of both, I think, again, coming back to the question of, when you're a sort of small company and you're a tech startup and you're trying to make a mark in the world, you can't, shy retiring wallflowers need not apply. You have to put yourself out there. So there's an element where you've got to go out there and you've got to push yourself out there, and you've got to sort of try and make rattle a few cages and, fly the flag and other such epithets. But then when you start doing that and you start to get some recognition, then obviously people then start to come to you because they kind of see you doing stuff and they think they look interesting. Honestly, it was just phenomenal with this Google Cloud SAP thing. They took out a full page of the Wall Street Journal. So they took out a full page advert in the Wall Street Journal saying, "Congratulations, Topolytics, on winning the Circular Economy Challenge." So I thought, well, I may get a full page in the Wall Street Journal at some point, some other point in my life, but just for the record, here it is. So, and that kind of thing clearly then generates an element of sort of recognition and interest. So it is a bit of both. So, but you have, you have to get out there. You've got to get out there, and obviously there are certain awards. There's always kind of awards things that one can apply for, and other competitions and blah 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 blah. So I think you do have to try and punch above your weight when you're sort of a small company in a trying to do your thing. And we're trying to do this globally. You know, we have this kind of global ambition, because waste is a big global challenge. So, you know, we have to get out there and try and sort of, you know, plant a flag in the ground and say, right, you know, this is what we're doing.
So have you got any advice to other tech startups out there or other technical businesses out there that want to become more visible? They know that they need to, but they're not quite sure what the best way to do it is, or they're not quite sure how to do it on a sort of bootstrap budget. Because I remember that you were saying that you did all of this by bootstrapping earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no substitute for networking. I mean, I think even in these days of digital marketing, inbound marketing, blogging, podcasting, etc., 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 actually there is still, you know, huge power in the network. Now, obviously, you can generate a network digitally and virtually, but that face-to-face thing, going to the, you know, the idea of the watering holes, you know, where do your customers gather, you know, and going meeting them at these places. I still think there's a huge power in that personal kind of network thing, which is difficult because, of course, you can't be everywhere at once. But you know, so lots of traveling to get to these places and to meet these people. But I still think there's huge power in that, even in today's digitally enabled world. So that's one thing I'd say. The other one is, you know, think about the sort of the way you promote yourselves. Clearly, you can do a lot of that inbound marketing for very little money. So blogging, clearly, that kind of thing. But attached to that, you know, classic good old-fashioned media relations. You know, get yourself a good, you know, freelance PR person that really knows what they're doing, and get some good photography. You know, we've sort of had, when we get team shots done, we all go and stand in wheelie bins. And it kind of works, you know, because it's like, and I've then had photographs where I've, you know, and bless Edinburgh Council, it made a 10-ton skip of it. It cleaned it and made it available to me to kind of stand in and climb on and have and jump out of and have photographs done. But, you know, so good photography, I think, makes a massive difference, because you've got a very, very limited opportunity to get your message across. So if people see a photograph of us standing in bins, number one, they either think we're mad, or they think, actually, these guys have got a bit of a sense of humor, and but they think, well, they're the waste guys, aren't they? Yeah, well, yeah. So I think that's and you can do that for not a huge amount of money as well.
That's an incredible tip there, and it's about thinking outside of the box, because I think a lot of people shy away from, I know this is from personal experience, kind of shy away from having your photograph taken, because you don't want to be the face of the business. But it's, if you can have more team shots, that you think a little bit outside of the box when it comes to the environment in which you're being photographed in, and making the photograph be something that people remember and associate you with what it is that you're doing as well. So yeah, you're going to have to share those photos with me, because then I can share them with everybody.
Well, you can see them on the website anyway. And you know, do a Google search for Topolytics and you'll see them all. So yeah, and obviously linked to that, I mean, clearly video now is becoming, you know, much more important communication medium, both obviously this kind of thing, you know, but also, you know, video kind of explainers and all that kind of stuff. So that, you know, clearly that's a development from, you know, photography, but it's the same idea of the visual thing is, and what we do as a business is very visual. You know, maps are visual storytelling tools, and that's basically what they do. But underneath that, you know, so you tell the story and you change behavior. But underneath that, there's a huge amount of power in terms of the analytics as well. So we're a very visual, you know, company in that way.
Brilliant. And then my other question as well was, you were talking about collaborations and partnerships, so working with the OS to solve the problem for the award. I talk a lot about collaborate, don't compete, find others to work with instead of try to figure out how to solve the problem yourself. Do you have any advice for other people listening that are kind of thinking, oh, I know I need to solve this problem. I kind of think I know how to do it, but I'm not sure how to do it on my own. Or, or how could they follow in your footsteps and take advantage of those collaborations?
Well, I think again, it comes back to, I think, just having a willingness to do that, and having just the get up and go, and just getting out there and making those connections. And when I think about all the organizations that have helped us, because that's what it's all about, and we've sort of collaborated with, we've got to a certain extent, we've got our start in life through Zero Waste Scotland, which is Scottish Government's kind of delivery arm for delivering on its kind of recycling and circular economy targets. And they've been really kind of helpful to us. And then we've had Innovate UK, been brilliant actually. So, and there's loads of kind of support there and advice, and and obviously they run competitions, and there's sort of kind of grants and other things that are available to you. And we've also been on trade missions funded by Innovate UK, organised by an organisation called Clean and Cool, which takes clean tech companies to markets. So we've been to the US and been to Brazil, etc., etc. Obviously the OS we're working with at the moment. Then obviously we're now collaborating with Google Cloud and SAP. That's pretty good people to be collaborating with. And then the Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Government. We're based in Edinburgh, so there's kind of loads of support there. So a lot of it is just going out there and kind of finding these organisations, and because there's loads of help out there. There's loads of help. There's grants and money and everything else. Sometimes it's difficult to access and to navigate your way through it, but I think there is lots of stuff out there. I think the other area where we've done quite a lot of collaborating is with universities. And so, we've worked with St Andrews, with Edinburgh, with Stirling, with Cranfield, with Strathclyde. I've just come back from Bradford University. So, so we've done quite a lot of that stuff. And that collaboration varies from, helping, master students with their projects, to doing formal sort of collaborations as well. And some of that in Scotland we've done through the innovation centres in Scotland. So you've got one which is Census, which is all about sensing and imaging systems. And then the Data Lab is another one which is all focused on data and machine learning. And we're working with Data Lab on this DEFRA project as well. So again, I think it just comes back to a willingness to just get out there and find these organizations and navigate your way through it, and just explore what you can kind of do with them. So
it's great advice. And there's a lot of stuff that you've said in this interview so far, which is around mindset. We've not kind of labelled it with mindset. I'm going to throw it out there anyway. It's about having a positive mindset, and about, having confidence, willingness to put yourself out there, willingness to learn, go out, do more. And there's a lot that you can do with the right mindset, for sure.
Staying positive is a massive thing for me. Because it is difficult sometimes. But again, somebody asked me on a panel the other day, said, well, are things going to be better or worse in 30 years' time? And I was like, well, I have no idea, but I'd like to think they'll be better, because if, what else are you going to think? So I think your glass always has to be half full, even though sometimes it's so difficult. And I'm definitely a confidence player. I feed off positive, when I getting positive sort of vibes and feedback, I feed off that, and then I struggle otherwise. But you've just got to keep, regardless of your base mentality, you have to remain positive in this situation.
So do you have any advice for our listeners based around that? So how do you stay positive and optimistic despite people telling you, or despite people talking about, it's all doom and gloom, and you're not going to make an impact, or you're not going to make a change? How do you overcome those sort of naysayers, if you like?
Well, I think I don't know. Gosh, it sounds like some kind of in the psychiatrist's chair.
No, it's important because it happens all the time. You've always got people that are telling you it's never going to work. Especially with the plastic pollution problem. You've got all these people saying it doesn't.
True,
climate change doesn't exist. You've got people saying it's not as big a problem as that we're talking about, and there is a lot of negativity around it, and I think that surrounds a lot of industries.
Totally.
But what you're saying is so important that you've got to keep positive.
No, you're right. Sorry. So I mean, I'm just I'm trying not to be too sort of self-reflective about it. Yes, when I was a baby, I was blah, blah, blah. I mean, it is about actually just really grabbing onto the really positive stuff and really kind of that's your that's the lodestar, and just if the negative stuff is just crap, and just kind of just pushing that aside. I always think of, if anybody's seen, or if you've seen a film called Kelly's Heroes with Clint Eastwood and Telly Savalas and Donald Sutherland, and it was basically a bunch of American soldiers who discovered that there's a hoard of gold bars lying in a village in France, and this is right at the end of the war, and they think, well, let's go and grab the gold bars because this war's going to finish quite soon. And so they go off, but Donald Sutherland is a tank commander, and this is what 1944/45, and but he plays it as if he's a kind of 1968 hippie, from Haight-Ashbury. And he has this mantra that, whenever his crew are kind of moaning, he kind of says, "Hey man, less of those negative waves." This is, so it's a brilliant portrayal, totally out of sync with its time, but it's absolutely superb. And I always think that I always think of Donald Sutherland, and I think less of those negative waves, man. So if anybody's sort of really being negative, so I think it's just kind of latching on to the really positive stuff and pushing trying to push the crap aside, really. I don't think there's any no magic tricks really around that stuff.
Well, my magic trick is, it's not so much magic, but because I always come back to the old Jim Rohn quote, which is that you are the average of the top 5 people you spend the most time with. And, exactly what you said before, it's like surround yourself with happy, positive people because you'll feed off their energy. And, I'm exactly the same. It's like the more people that you surround yourself with, that you can bounce ideas off, that are optimistic, that are positive, you find yourself being more optimistic and positive. If you spend time with sort of negative people all the time, or if you spend time with people that are telling you can't do something or it's not going to work, then you'll start believing that as well.
But I also think that you need to be challenged, though. So I think you do need to be open to challenge,
for sure,
and to have people who, not necessarily negative, but they're sort of maybe putting an alternative approach to you or an alternative view, which actually could well be valid, because you might have got into a particular kind of mindset, or you might be a little bit timid about something, or you might be too gung-ho about something. And so it is a balance, isn't it, between positivity but also criticality, or I don't know what the right word would be, but a critical mentality, that where you're open to different ideas and different approaches to things as well.
It's not sports coaching methodology that in terms of challenge, and also I did so I used to be a rowing coach and have done various sports coaching qualifications, and definitely used that instead of management techniques. And then in my last job, we did a challenger coaching course, which was really fascinating because it really merged a lot of the things that I did in sports with business. And it was kind of showing the bell curve, where at the very top, you've got that kind of like peak performance. So you operate at peak performance, the very top of that bell curve, but it's that kind of, you need enough challenged so you can hit peak performance without then going down the bell curve, which is in stress and anxiety. So you do need people to challenge you, but in a loving boot sort of way. So they're challenging your assumptions so you can reach that peak performance point, but not tipping you over the edge into that kind of stress and anxiety method.
No, I agree. I mean, I think it is that kind of, it is a balance, isn't it, between just somebody who's just constantly sort of saying, "Hey, Mike, you're great."
Yeah, you don't want to spend time with
Everything
people
they're
that
doing
tell
is
you you're great
perfect.
all the time.
And then others who say, "Actually, Mike, you need to kind of think about this or that and the other." So yeah, so I agree. There is definitely a sort of balance there.
For sure. Cool. Well, we're running a bit out of time at the moment, but I'm just
Right.
keen. A couple of questions was, where do you see Topolytics going in the next sort of 5 years and beyond?
Oh wow! Well, I think fulfilling our ambition to be this sort of global kind of data set and analytics platform for primarily commercial and industrial waste materials, so that basically the outcomes are better for the waste producers and then better for if you like, the companies that are managing, processing, recycling that material. So less of that material is basically being wasted, more of the value is being kind of extracted from that material, like the true value in terms of that material. And so we've moved to a much more of a sort of circular model. I mean, our view is that we think, if we're successful, what will happen will be that, in the same way that energy has gone from a big centralized system to much more of a distributed system, where you've got these smaller kind of renewable energy sort of sources spread all over the place. So that system is much more complex, but actually it's better in terms of the outcomes. But what helps to hold that together is the kind of smart grid. That's why we see that happening with, certainly with commercial industrial waste materials, where you'll get much more kind of localized loops. You'll get much more sort of smaller volumes of materials which are being, where the value is being extracted. So if we're in that position then, and we've frankly built a scaled enterprise, then I'll be pretty happy about that.
Brilliant. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you following this podcast, what's the best way of doing that?
Oh man, well, you can email me at michael.groves@topolytics.com. Yeah, that's probably the best thing. So topolytics.com is the website, so you can come in through that, or email me directly. Go to my LinkedIn page, you'll find me easily enough. So yeah, any number of ways. But yeah, absolutely, I'd welcome any feedback, any suggestions, any thoughts, any offers, any asks, whatever.
And do you have any sort of parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share, or anything that you'd like to leave with?
Damn, I should have prepared a pithy quote, shouldn't I? Actually, yeah, I was when we were on this ocean summit in the middle of the Atlantic. There was a guy from brilliant guy, speaker from NASA's Ames Research Laboratory in California, and he put up a quote from Muhammad Ali, which was, impossible is temporary. And and I think there are variants of that out there, but I just thought, that is absolutely fantastic. Impossible is temporary. So that's my pithy quote anyway. To what it's
I
worth.
love it. What a great way to end this interview. Thank you so very, very much for coming on and speaking to me today. And pleasure. I hope everybody listening has gained a lot from this interview as well.
Okay. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. Bye.
Okay. Cheers. Bye. Bye.